I get that the fact that it's taken me 8+ videos to get into Being in Time is obnoxious, but here I'm actually just following Heidegger anyway. Being in Time is actually going to have 2 introductions. This video is going to start to get into the first of those introductions. That introduction will largely be about the theme of the book, whereas the second introduction will be about the method. So in this introduction on what he calls the exposition of the question of being, Heidegger will try to explain what he means when he's talking about the question of being. And in the first section, the way that he'll try to do that is by clearing aside what he thinks are some common prejudices about being. I'm going to run through those prejudices quickly here in a second, and he's going to bounce them all the way back to Aristotle. But as I do so, I want to keep in mind that there's sort of a guiding thread to all of these. So remember in the previous video, I had said that what we're doing here is trying to clear aside some presuppositions about being that get in the way of us seeing that the history of philosophy actually answers the question of being in various ways. And that gets in the way of us being able to, therefore, pose the question and see what I'm calling some of the more mythical or weird features of the way in which the history of ontology unfolds and relates to the history of the, let's say, quote-unquote, West here. So what are those presuppositions? Well, Heidegger is going to mention 3 here. The first is that being is, he says, the most universal thing. So Aristotle, and all of these, by the way, are going to have to do with how Aristotle works on definitions. So generally speaking, how do we make definitions in Aristotle? We have a genus and a species. So there's a species, which is defined by a genus, and then it's different, it's a broader category, and then it's different from other things in that same broader category. So you've got a more universal term and a difference. A chair is a piece of furniture with 4 legs that you can sit in or whatever, right? As opposed to a piece of furniture that you eat food on. Same genus, different differences. So in this sense, Aristotle proposes and then I think rejects, and Heidegger is going to certainly think it rejects, the idea of being as a supergenus. We just go out until we get to the most universal claim at all. But notice if that were true, there would be no way to define it because the most universal thing can't be defined by any difference. There would be no difference within it. This is going to be very important because, as we're going to see, Heidegger's discussion of being is going to often involve what he's going to call the ontological difference. And I'll talk about what that means later. It's a huge concept and a huge idea, but for now, let's just notice he's already starting to preview that idea. So the second presupposition he thinks, and this is going to be related, is that being is indefinable. Oh, so look at that. I actually jumped the gun. That's fine, right? So we've seen now how it's indefinable and how that relates to it. We can't define something if we can't see how it differs from other things. And if being is really the question of the totality, is it something that you can have any possible way of defining? It seems to lack the texture. It seems to lack the grit, that play between different elements that allows us to make sense of anything at all. Now, the weird thing about that, and here's going to be the third prejudice, is going to be that this means that being is also for Heidegger, or on Heidegger's reading of Aristotle here, the most self-evident concept. Don't we already all know what it means? How could we talk? How could we make any other definitions? If definitions imply knowledge of the universal that we're distinguishing a difference from, wouldn't the most universal thing have to be known in advance? So these are going to be the problems that Heidegger says we're going to have to clear aside if we want to understand what's going on with what he's calling the question of being. A lot of that, as we're going to see, is going to now turn on how we ask questions at all. How can we use the way that we ask questions in order to ask this one very weird kind of question? To think about that, we're going to have to think about how questions work. And that's going to be the subject of section 2 of Being in Time.